Welcome to Risk Engineers Talk Governance. In this episode, due diligence engineers Richard Robinson and Gaye Francis discuss cunning versus smart in the health and safety space. We hope you enjoyed the chat. If you do, please support our work by giving us a rating and subscribing on your favourite podcast platform. And if you'd like more information on R2A, our newsletter and resources, or have any feedback or topic ideas, please head to the website r2a.com.au.
Hi Richard, welcome to our podcast session today.
It's good to be back again here.
Good. Today we're going to talk about cunning versus smart, but as it applies in the risk world, and especially in relation to work health and safety.
Sort of reminds me that, I forget which comedian it was, the Australian comedian, he was talking, what's the difference between the Muppets and the Kardashians?
Okay. Yeah,
it's just the Muppets are real.
Okay, I wasn't expecting a Richard joke at the start of our podcast, but
I'm
that's
sorry,
okay.
I can't remember the comedian. He's the guy who used to run Spicks and Specs.
Adam Hills.
Yes, that's
Yes,
right.
very good. So we're just sort of reflecting on why we think where we are in the...
There is a relevance to that joke. I'll come back to it.
Okay. What, when I least expected?
No, for the subject.
Okay, cool. So cunning versus smart, and especially in terms of risk and how we've seen people making decisions or not making decisions, as the case may be. And you sort of broke people into three groups. Do you want to give us a quick summary of that?
It's just my observation about history, watching and living in different organisations. And one of the things I noticed is that it didn't always seem to me that it was the smart, competent people that got the top job. It was always the cunning. And what I meant by that was that, in a large organisations, you see there's a corporate change or some change in their business environment, and then the deck chairs shuffle around.
Yeah.
And then the people who tend to survive that process tend to be what I would call the cunning. Mm-hmm. Now, not necessarily the smart or the most competent.
Yes.
And that was always a bit of a frustration to me. And I used to watch all this with some interest, trying to figure out what was going on. What I did work out, and because I saw people with great academic ability, for example, who had no cunning whatsoever and just floundered around completely.
So were they in the smart category?
Well, no, not depends what you mean by smart. It's got to be smart and sharp. Whereas what you really needed in your senior positions are people who are both smart and probably had some academic ability, but it depends what you mean by intellectual ability rather than academic ability per se. And had the cunning too. And whenever I found one of those, I found they were the right people to work for.
Right.
I remember, I think I told you, when I was working for GHD, I was coming back on a flight, I was sitting next to Ben Fink, the managing director, and the Victorian government had gone through some crisis, I couldn't remember what. And he said, it's going to be a problem this time around. Previous times crises happened, they had money. And as soon as an issue happens and the government's got money, they'll start spending. And so what you've got to do is position yourself to find these things. Now, when I looked at that board and they had Sir Bernard Callanan as chair, who is the hero of Sparrow Force and all that sort of thing, and the highest ranking Catholic in Australia, and Ben Fink, who's from the Fink family, who's sort of a Jewish family, and you looked at this organisation of these two people who are running this show and you thought, this is a good place to work for. These are intelligent people, they're cunning, they know
What they're doing,
and they also have the intellectual smarts to make it happen.
Yeah.
And you just suddenly realise why an organisation is successful. When you see that kind of arrangement, you just know it's going to work.
I think you called that a wisdom, didn't you?
Yeah, and that's what I refer to as the wisdom thing. And when you get a team like that, it's extraordinary.
Right.
But that doesn't happen very often from what I've seen in business. And we've noticed now people keep talking about boards and how frequently they're changing and the kind of people who are getting on the boards now.
Yeah.
That they're making it a career of professional board membership rather than being technically competent in the business that they're becoming a board member for.
Or sitting back and saying, what does this organisation need going forward? And it's not a short-term vision.
Particularly when it's a technological organisation, engineering organisation, where you need, normally you've got to have been in the business for a while to actually understand it, whether it be water or rail or aviation or whatever the technology is.
Yeah.
If you don't actually have an experience in that patch, being an outside board member is good to a point, but you need some people that really lived
and breathed it to be able to ask those hard questions or challenge those questions.
Well, one of the things that frustrates us, I think I told you, I will not say which company it was, but I came across a lawyer board member. It was underground mining organisation. He'd never been underground to have a look at what what these people who work for the organisation actually did. And we've come at a number of times, we keep coming across ports and pilotage
Pilots
organisations.
haven't been out on the water.
They've actually never done a job with a marine pilot to find out just what these people are doing.
Yeah.
If you go on a marine pilotage at 2 a.m. in the morning on a stormy night, it's character forming, is it not?
Yes, I've done it a couple of times in my younger youth, and not anymore, not for me.
Getting off a ship
Yeah.
when the sea's heaving 1.5 to 2 metres and you get it wrong, you lose your legs, it's character forming.
And I think that's probably a good thing. And I remember doing a job for a board, and they introduced that, not to do a pilotage because it wasn't a pilotage organisation, but they actually, for new board members, they actually took them around to some of their sites, and they had to almost do like a site induction exercise. So they had this familiarisation with what the business did, because just sitting in a boardroom and getting papers about what the organisation doesn't really give you that appreciation.
No, unless you're down there talking to them and seeing what they do and slopping around in the mud or whatever the guys actually doing the job is, you don't really understand.
Yeah.
And especially if it's 2 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
I remember going down when the old yard in Melbourne, the Flinders Street Yard, which is no longer there, but I turned up at 2 a.m. to see what these guys are doing. And they were completely astonished to see me. What are you doing here, sort of thing?
Well, I think we often do that as part of our due diligence exercise, don't we? You know, you've got to go down and you're really looking for what are all the conditions that the people who are doing the job are faced with.
I'm not sure we do it as much as we used to.
We didn't do it as much as we used to, but we used to do it.
All the
when
time.
we're doing it, I think the aspect of our work has changed nowadays.
I think that's correct.
And we're more a communication exercise of reporting up to the people that can make the decisions about what's being done, and a communication tool.
Well, I think that's correct, because what we keep finding is that the organisation knows what the issues are
Absolutely.
as a whole,
Yeah.
but the decision makers don't have a clear comprehension or articulation in a way that they can actually make useful decisions. But this is also to do with the fact that the board members don't have that experience that they used to have. So whereas previously, if you dealt with a rail organisation, there were several people on the board who basically lived and breathed railways for the last 30 years, and it was visceral. They knew what the issues were.
And then they were sort of supported by the legal representation and the accounting sort of one, whereas it appears the boards that we've seen appears the other way, that they're heavily leaning towards, the legal
independent
and accounting.
directors, and therefore they're trying to minimise legal liability rather than optimise safety per se. And that part of the reason for that's not because they don't necessarily perhaps want to make the organisation safe, but they just don't know enough about it.
Well, we just did a whole podcast on that, didn't we? Around the ignorance is endemic, and what information do people
Well, particularly
have?
when you see obviously part of the reason, the chairs tend to influence who gets picked as a board member. One of the things you try and do is pick board members who are going to be agreeable with the chair's point of view. But if you keep that up, you eventually wind up in a very bad place.
So SFAIRP is really encouraging people to be wise, so have that smarts, but also a cunningness about them that they can communicate what needs to be done going forward.
But it's more than that, because you've got to think up new ideas.
So that's the innovation
It's the
aspect.
innovation part. I mean, if you just cunning and you don't understand the business, you're not in a position to think up new ideas, because you just don't know enough about it.
Yeah, right.
It's one of those weird things, and I can see why it's such a complicated thing, because on the one hand, you've got to have informed people and know what they're doing, but just doing the same thing for 30 years doesn't make you innovative, that's for sure.
No, that is very true.
One of the reasons why you get external parties in, because they come with a different point of view and a different experience.
So it's a really fine line between getting that balance of stable people who know about the thing, and then new people, because it's often the new people that challenge
That's correct.
the status quo and have that innovation.
And they'll be coming perhaps from another industry, because one of the things we do is pull ideas out of other
Correct.
industries. It's a bit like that court paper you did, where you're basically saying, well, why don't train drivers have PPUs, the personal pilots units that marine pilots have?
Which is a situational awareness device, yeah.
And technically there's no reason why they shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's just that the railways haven't thought about it.
Or we have never done it that way before, and
And
why
the
would you
railways
go-
don't like that. I mean, it's just not the way they do about things. So I'm not saying but we have noticed that the boards are changing over so fast now that ignorance is becoming endemic in a way that it never used to be.
Yeah.
And I suspect that's one of the reasons why we're showing up more often advising boards. But what we're really doing is taking what the organisation knows and representing in a way in which that board, which tends to respond to liability more than safety,
Yes.
it answers it properly.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit sad, but that's what we mean by the Cunnings inheriting the world more than the wise, if that makes sense.
But it's very difficult. And how do you keep that corporate knowledge and ownership with the people that are making long-term decisions?
Well, it's slightly more than that too, because one of the strange things that happen is people keep talking about stakeholders, that there's the shareholders, but boards are basically taught these days that their shareholders are everything.
Yeah.
And that the people who work there are just functionaries to make it happen. And part of that's to do with it just come down to money. And when it only comes down to money and no other values and no sense of duty, I think you've got a problem. And if you look at the world at the moment, it does seem to be coming down to money, not a sense of duty. Well, I told you, when I was running around the Victoria Division of Engineers Australia, there was a plaque on the wall. Obviously, a lot of the chairs that came out of there were all from the Second World War era and vintage. But I didn't even know who the guy was. I still don't know who the guy was. All it just said, there's a bust of him, and it just said he served.
Right.
Didn't say anything else.
Yeah.
And so it was a question of doing the right thing by your organisation and your society as a whole, rather than just saying we're here for the money.
That's probably, and I think that's where the importance of engineering comes in, because, if we all sit back, engineering makes a better society. And I think sometimes we forget that.
Well, the commercial people try to make you forget it, that's for sure.
I'm just trying to end on a positive, Richard, but But it is, you have to work in the constraints of that. And I think, we've talked before, money isn't everything. You do need it to be able to do things, but I think you've got to keep that bigger picture in mind.
But that's correct. But see, what's happened, we've commented on this before, what's happened with engineers generally is they've been pushed downwards and put into their boxes, if it were.
Yeah.
And as that fourth year engineering student at MIT remarked to me when I was lecturing there, you might all be born creative, but you can be trained out of it. So you've got to make sure that you keep that creative bug going.
Creative and the innovation going.
And that's the wise part. You keep looking for new things.
Yeah. And you do that by surrounding yourself with people and keep being more informed.
Yeah, but it's like our frustration with the way the IT world's going. I sort of commented that, like one other time, that I was getting frustrated our laptop was being turned into a giant iPhone. Well, I just noticed the most recent Mac release, they've taken an iPhone chip and put it into their most recent Mac laptop. That's what they've actually done.
There you go.
But then I was noticing that Windows world is seriously complaining, and what they've actually done is where we used to run the system ourselves, and we're responsible, we keep trying to do that, and we're resisting it. But what the IT people are doing is basically saying, well, no, we run everything out here in the cloud, and you guys are just an appendage, just a phone attached.
So they're giving you what you think you need.
They're giving you what they think you want,
and
we're getting crankier and crankier about it, aren't we?
Does that put us in the cunning, the smart, or the wise category?
We're aspiring to the wise, let's put it that way.
Let's do that.
Let's go with that.
All right. On that note, thanks for joining us today, Richard, and we'll see you next time. Actually, Richard, we didn't finish because I don't know that you finished off your joke that you started about the difference between the Kardashians and the Muppets. How it relates to our podcast.
Well, I try to point out the Kardashians have been fairly cunning, but they weren't actually wise. And the question then becomes, which is wiser, a Muppet or a Kardashian? And obviously the Muppets.
Okay.
Which tells you a bit about how we've gone as a society, doesn't it?
It does, it certainly does. So on that note, I think we have finished now. So thank you again. We'll see you next time. Thanks everyone.